How do you tune the Infinity IRSV? This question comes to us from Lucas in Brazil. He writes, hey, you talked about voicing, for example, the BHK power amps on this system, but how does the IRS crossover actually work? The subs have their separate amplifiers with servo controllers. Does the preamp feed the crossovers and the output of them feed the BHK amps to drive the mid-range tweeter cabinet? If it's like that, does your power amp match the gain of the sub amps, or do the sub amps have adjustable gain? If the subs have separate gain control, how do you know the bass cabinet is not overpowering the mid and hi-fi cabinets? Well, clearly a lot of questions there and a lot of confusion over these most magnificent of loudspeakers, the classic Infinity IRS5s, which we are one of very few people around the world that actually own a pair of these original loudspeakers. They were the first loudspeaker that I would say was ever state of the art, and today they haven't gone far away. I think we can do better as we design our own replacements for the IRS5, which was Arnie Nudell's finest creation, and we're going to, in his legacy, build up yet another attempt at it. But I got to tell you, these speakers are some of the best in the world. They will always be some of the best in the world. Why? Because they make music. Because a violin sounds like a violin, and a tuba sounds like a tuba. If you put the right electronics on these speakers, you will hear dynamics like you've never heard before. I mean, how could you not? There are 133 drivers on this thing. You know, there are 12 mid-ranges, all dipoles, working front and back, dividing up just that single frequency. There's 36 tweeters, 24 in the front, 24 in the back, 12 12-inch woofers, all servo controlled. And the reason is that, well, first off, it's a line source, so anywhere you're sitting in the room, you get pretty much the same wave launch, which is great, and you're dividing up the job of all those drivers into multiple drivers, so that in the mid-range, only 1/12 of the work is done by one driver. That means that together, these suckers can have effortless dynamic range. The only thing holding them back are your amplifiers. Here we use the BHK monos, the 300s, and the systems. But anyway, it's a magnificent pair of speakers. We're going to try and beat them with the AN1s. And Arnie thinks, you know, Arnie, the designer of these speakers, thought he knew how and left me the plans before he unfortunately passed away. So let's answer the actual question, though. So these are actually kind of simple to set up. The crossover for each of these speakers, for these wings, and in the wings are the tweeters and the mid-ranges, and they go down to 100 hertz. So from 100 hertz up to beyond 20 kilohertz, these wings provide that. And within them is a passive crossover. So we hook up the BHK amplifiers full range directly into the wings, as we call them, of the IRS5. Now, I will tell you, though, that Infinity, so that's the first answer to your question. There is really no external crossover. We essentially run BHKs directly in, and there is no crossover. Now, I will tell you that Infinity recommended that we separately roll off through a high-pass filter, a simple 6 dB per octave single-pole high-pass filter, these wings. Now, I've tried it both ways, and frankly, it sounds better without that roll-off. I like it better without the roll-off, but you do risk damaging the EMIMs, the electromagnetic induction mid-range drivers. So to err on the safe side, we have a single crossover, and I'll show that to you. Let's see if I can So, and this is the setup back here. So on the input, whoa, you see this box? So there's just this is all balanced. So we put in a pair, one for the inverting, one for the non-inverting signal, because it's all XLR balanced, right? And this is just a little box that we built. It's got 2 capacitors in there, and you can find information on that. You can email me, but if you have a pair and you really want to know, but I think they're like 0.3s microfarads. So this is the first filter, and this rolls off the bottom end as in a high-pass filter, so that these speakers don't go too low, and that limits what the BHKs get from the BHK preamp. But I could run it without that. I could just pop this thing off, maybe, and just run it straight in, right? Because it's just a little separate filter. So that's that. Now, the rest of it is all contained here in this box. This box is a fairly complex crossover that PS Audio built many of these boxes. We built all the ones for the IRS betas. We built some of them for the IRS itself. I think this particular one was made by Greg Shug in Monolithic Sounds. And, oh, someone's coming in. Hello? Hi.
How's it going?
Good. It's the Stathers. Well, we're videotaping, and you're right in the middle of it.
Cool.
There you go. Bob is our chief engineer, and his son Brian. So anyway, so this is the crossover box, and it's a fairly complicated and servo. So you got the crossover and the servo are all inside of this separate box here. And there's many controls. You've got volume, you've got multiple controls to set up the woofer towers, but they're specific to the woofer tower. So everything here is for the woofer towers. So these run full range, then all we have to do is set up the woofer towers. And that's done by ear. Frankly, there's a number of setup guides that Infinity publishes, but at the end of the day, it's all done by ear. So I probably spent a week trying to set it up and get it just right. And you go through a number of tracks. You go through bass tracks, you go through non-bass tracks. You want to make sure the voices sound natural, that they're not too chesty, and which means you have too much, or it's too high or not high enough. So you go through all of that, but all of it's done by ear. So that's the explanation on the Infinity IRSV, and that's how we tune it. And when we move these over to the new building, which will happen fairly soon, we will have to go through that whole process again, because every room's different, right? All right. Well, thank you for the question. And I do hope if you ever get out of Brazil and you want to come to Boulder, come on in, and we'd be happy to show you around. All right. Bye-bye.